Good evening. My name is Alexander Hagan. I'm the CEO of a small, medium-sized tech company. I'm talking tonight about climate collapse. The paper that I want to describe to you involves loading all of the latest climate reports into AI, principally ChatGPT, and doing a lot of training and refinement of it. Um, Now, when I say training and refinement of it, I could give you a 10-page report on correcting errors that are emitted and so forth, and trying to remove bias from it, the tendency of AI to mirror the subject. Obviously, when doing scientific analysis, you should see less of that. So in the last video, part one, which I ask you to look at before watching this, although I'll try to make this self-containing, we were talking about the Progressive DNC Climate Emergency Declaration, which we did in 2020, and we got like 70 delegates to sign off on it, as well as, I don't know if they're here, look at that. Yes, they're right in this one here. There they are. I hope you guys don't mind my showing your names. And I definitely want to get back in touch with these people. And I was told to take this to the highest level. Uh, so we've got a number of people that back this. The key issue are these uh, uh, tipping points. So when the Arctic, actually it's summer ice, goes to zero in the summer, this will increase the temperatures by X amount. And there's already CO2 in the atmosphere latently that will affect. So you have a tipping point, and then you have a feedback, tipping point and feedback. And the problem is this is additive, and it really should be multiplicative. So I have vetted this pretty strongly, and I really ask anyone who is technical in this domain to give me their feedback about what they're seeing on these issues. So my view is that if everyone knew how dire the situation was going to be if we didn't act, I believe everyone would demand action. People would demand action from their political leaders. It would be so overwhelming that they would have to fall into line. It really doesn't matter to them what we do as long as they stay in power. I don't want to be too cynical, but if everyone's clamoring for green energy, they're going to dang well give you green energy. And I want to, sort of cut to the chase. So this is a lengthy report that you can look at just preliminarily to just flip through it instantaneously. Here we see the era from now till 2040 of hydrology. That means that we're going to have terrible droughts, we're going to have severe storms, we're going to have flooding, we're going to have. So let's just stick with that for now. Severe storms, flooding, and drought. There's more to it than that. Then there's soil wet, dry. So soils are going to be too wet to be productive for agriculture and too dry to be productive for agriculture. And they will striate, they will split out, and there will be areas that fall into those two categories. Areas with persistent excessive rain, areas with inadequate rain. Then there's the separation of the ocean layers, the warm layer on top and the cold layer below, which will affect phytoplankton. It will affect a lot of things. It is not what we want. We want the water to churn and to mix the hot water with the cold water. And that's what a hurricane does. A hurricane is nature's way of churning excessively hot water until it's eliminated. It's quite miraculous. Then we have the Southern Ocean lag. And this is a fact that we've heated the planet so much that even if we stop all emissions and go carbon neutral or even carbon negative, the ocean will continue to be giving off heat because we've heated it so much. And then there's something called outgassing, where certain parts of the ocean will start emitting CO2. And I'm not sure whether they always occur together or occur separately. Then we have the cryosphere. This is Greenland, Antarctica, the Arctic, and our glaciers. And the glaciers are going to cause quite a lot of chaos because we're going to see rivers dry up in the late summer and fall in the high altitude areas. And so they won't be year long anyway. They won't be perennial. Uh, we're going to see sea level rise, and the latest reports show that sea level rise actually isn't simply uh, a an effect of a tipping point, which is the collapse of ice. Uh, Sea level rise actually changes the climate itself, so it becomes a tipping point and feedback itself, or triggering by the tipping point of sea level rise, we have a feedback of more chaotic weather systems. Um, so there's a lot of things that happen as all this ice melts that are negative. Then we have the biosphere fire loop. So as this number of disorders occur in the seas and disorders occur in our rain and drought systems, then we go to the biosphere fire loop. So forests start burning down, feeding vast amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. And then, of course, we have the permafrost, which is full of methane. And this is one of the largest drivers in this particular chart, as you can see, of warming. So the permafrost is going to be giving off uh, methane as it warms. And it also will render northern Canada and Alaska right when northern Canada and Siberia right when we need them the most, if we do run into the higher temperature scenarios on the planet, it will render them uninhabitable. A mix of saltwater intrusions from sea level rise and hissing bogs of methane. Um, then we will have the aerosol removal effect. So if we do get into clean energy, we are going to unmask our coal emissions and other sulfur dioxide and aerosol emissions that we have now, and this will heat the planet. I've seen numbers much higher than a fifth of a degree Celsius. Then there's this governance delay, which is what this whole presentation is about, is if you understand what's going to happen if we don't change, you will want us to change no matter who you are. Um, then there's reforestation damping. And That one I have to look into. I think that might mean that we're reforesting in areas that are just going to burn, but I have to check that one. And this turns into four overall stages: a hydrology ocean stratification stage, which is moving into the atmosphere, the weather, carrying rain, carrying hurricanes, carrying droughts, and then the issues that come with ocean stratification, which include phytoplankton loss, which makes the earth darker, as well as producing less oxygen. Then we go to the second stage where we start burning the forests and jungles. And then there's a linkage between that and the melting of the ice, the cryosphere, because this will produce a lot of soot, all these fires, which will further darken things on the poles and in Greenland at times, which will speed the melting of the ice because it will be black instead of white on its surface. Then we go into the acceleration phase. So now we have the ice melting, we have the forest burning, we have the wild storms, and we have the ocean splitting into the warm and cold layers and starting to change its behavior, changing the monsoons. So India's monsoons will become unstable. Um, and So there's a lot that's going on here. We've got ocean outgassing, emitting CO2. We've got these storms that are affecting our negatively, ultimately to create fire conditions, presumably. Uh, and Then we get to the third phase where all of these things, the land, the sea, and the atmosphere, and the cryosphere, the ice world, are all reinforcing each other. Um, and then the final stage is where both human and nature are driving our climate towards a higher point. And even if human activities, carbon stops, nature is already on a trajectory to the hothouse Earth. So then what we see is the latest. So these bulletins will keep adding. Right now, the bulletin is that we have a problem with absorbing carbon we emit from uh, nature. Nature is refusing to take our carbon anymore. Dry tropics are losing. Um, I'm not sure what a PGC is. I have to look that up. But these losses are nearly cancel all northern soil gains. 83 of losses percent of losses directly traced to land use change, grazing, erosion, peat fires, and deforestation. So it sounds almost like a vandalism, although in Borneo and parts of Indonesia, these peat fires are certainly happen. So the wet tropics remain a weak sink, a place that absorbs carbon, but not enough to compensate. The dry tropics are now emitting carbon. The land sink, traditionally absorbing 29% of our emissions, is collapsing 10 to 20 years ahead of model expectations. This accelerates airborne CO2 by 1.5 to 2 parts per million, about 0.25% above previous projections per year. The Greenland ice issue, we're losing 30 million tons of ice per hour in Greenland, 30% more mass loss than in the IPCC estimates. This is going to cause a lot of problems. It's going to cause 1.2 to 2.5 meters sea level rise by the end of the century. Although I'm much more interested in getting the full graph from now till the end. The ocean sink is in decline. It can no longer absorb our garbage, our CO2. So we have a combined sink decline. So we no longer can rely on nature to absorb 33% of our, well, actually, technically, it's 25% of our carbon. Nature should be uh, able to non-harmfully absorb uh, around 7.5 what is it gigatons of CO2. That is billion tons of CO2 a year, and it's looking like it's much, much lower than that. Now, the good news is there are things we can do gradually to improve our carbon sinks. Take care of nature. Don't let it burn down. There uh, developed all sorts of strategies for carbon capture organically. Now, there's also inorganic carbon capture, which unfortunately is probably going to happen as well. I hope we can do it by simply declaring a climate emergency moratorium on fossil fuels for non-emergency uses. But this direct air capture is dropping in price every year, and I think we could set a price of about $200 a ton. So that means if you have 10 billion tons you need removed, that would be $2 trillion a year until you remove it. And we've probably loaded the atmosphere with 500 to 1,500 tons of carbon more than would be ideal to maintain the paradise climate that we've had for thousands of years up until the Industrial Revolution, when we started generating all this smoke in our skies and ravaging all the forests with development. So we have two trajectories. One is full mobilization, and that would mean a normal mobilization of our leadership taking this seriously. So we have 10 years to get down to 90% emissions reduction. It's still pretty severe, but the Progressive Emergency Declaration is declaring this in 12 months. And This is a couple of examples, but there's much more to it than this. And I'm not sure the best way to sell this is to talk about banning beef. Concrete is a much bigger problem than cattle, from what I've seen. And of course, bison produce half the methane that cattle do. So anyway, I don't want to be apologizing about beef. I mean, we should stop having cattle by and large for a time until we can start bringing nature into balance. We need the carbon cycle in balance, and the carbon cycle is out of balance. That is the amount of carbon that is emitted from everything, every being, every industrial plant, and that exchange with nature, the absorption of that carbon is going to drive the planet into an uninhabitable condition. So these are some of the important recent reports that change what was already a very significantly alarming picture. Um, Ocean sink declines, land sink breakdown. So the Earth is rebelling, ice melt acceleration, um, and then the combining these effects drives. So this 3C here, this would be horrible. The and the ocean pump weakening. So that should be. I will explain the ocean pump in just a moment. So, you can also load this paper, which is on academia.org, into an AI or talk with a scientist or get some books on climate science and walk through these things. So the AMOC, for example, is moving the hot water from the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico to Greenland. And that's what keeps Europe warm because Europe's actually at the latitude of Alaska. And when that breaks down, its weather will become like Alaska's weather. And uh, Iceland has already declared a national security emergency because the AMOC may break down, and that will turn Iceland into a frozen wasteland all year round until we heat the planet so badly that there is no ice left, which is a long way away, but it's going to happen. Possibly 90% of the ice will be gone by the end of this century. I haven't graphed that yet. I haven't seen a graph of that, but it's going, and we could figure that out if we want to do. Uh, so, um, so then there's these key reports that have come out, which I'm going to put in the notes on this video. This would be all here under feedback 2025. And then here was the feedback mapping I did in 2020. Um, and feedback 2025 is a list of articles. So if you, for example, wanted to go through all of the key findings, those are here or they're in the main document. And hopefully all of them are in the main document. In fact, I think I put this into the main document. Um, so And these pillars have to do with ocean greenness or phytoplankton decline, which reduces oxygen and carbon capture, drives up carbon, reduces reflectivity of the ocean, making the Earth warm more. Then there's the observation-based radiative forcing, which is thousands of Hiroshima-sized bombs per second in terms of energy that the Earth is now absorbing, which it wasn't previously. We have a 1 watt per meter energy imbalance. So if you take the whole world, which is like, and turn it into a square, might be like 20,000 miles on each side. It's a little less than that. So we're talking 400 million, 20,000, yeah, 400 million square miles, and this watt per meter. So it's an enormous, mind-boggling number how much heat the Earth is absorbing. Then the record CO2 surge, it's just a fact that we are seeing the record-breaking uh, increases in atmospheric CO2. And part of that is because of these weakening carboning sinks and weakening carbon sinks, natural places that absorb carbon. And it's also partly why these carbon sinks are weakening, is they're getting overloaded. Then there's this breakdown in energy between the northern and southern hemisphere. So I'm not sure I went through this in the previous video. I believe I didn't. The state of the climate is something else. This is a shattering document. It indicates that nearly every major indicator, heat, ocean acidity, glacier loss, wildfire area, and extreme events, is changing faster than previous assessments projected. The report concludes that we are likely entering a new climate regime where feedbacks and compounding shocks dominate, making old assumptions about gradual linear change obsolete. So this is a very important document. Um, and then this document from Nature uh, indicates that we are looking at centuries of sea level rise. Ice sheets respond slowly but irreversibly once thresholds are crossed. The research shows that today's warming has already committed the world to meters of future sea level rise over the long term. And that means goodbye, Florida, goodbye, the greater New Orleans area, goodbye, Bangkok, goodbye, I think, big chunks of coastal Vietnam, goodbye to huge amounts of the fertile lands of Northwest China, or let's say West China, uh, along the ocean in China. In the northern part of China, there's a huge risk and maybe they'll build dikes, but coastal societies must plan for a fundamentally different geography. And if those dikes ever broke, um, it would be really interesting um, in a bad way. So I don't want to go through all of this because you can go through all of it, but I wanted to just drop along the way. We've got the updated extinction escalator because these are new informations that we're finding. We're going to be at 1.8 by 2028 is what is being forecast, 2 between 2029 and 2033. So what are the impacts of these things? Um, so land sink plateau reach, no more carbon absorbed by land. Ocean sink efficiency failing. Less and less carbon can be absorbed by the ocean. The Southern Ocean is storing heat faster than models expected. So the key tipping points that are going to happen is that the dry tropical soil carbon is going to release um, because more and more the tropics are going to get uh, uh, dry from droughts. Coral reefs are functionally going to cease to exist in most regions. Arctic sea ice, we're going to see this very dangerous tipping point of the ice-free Arctic summer by 2030, according to the forecast. Um, and potentially multi-million mortality heat waves plausible. I'm surprised that that's being posited at 1.5 to 1.8. I think that is an error. Um, but multi-million mortality heat waves will happen, certainly, and it is possible it could be even at that low temperature, because 1.8 is 3.6 inland, which is, 5 Fahrenheit. So what's hitting 128 now, or 100 in humid weather, 90 in humid weather, and you add another 5 degrees Fahrenheit, you get into these lethal wet bulb events. So if the outside temperature is higher than your body's inside temperature, and there's a lot of humidity, your body cannot use sweat to cool, and you will simply gradually move towards the atmospheric temperature in the core of your body, which will cause brain damage, organ failure, and death. So you will rely on being indoors with air conditioning in these areas as the temperature rises. But I would drill down on this and see whether it's really at 1.8. But regardless, it will be in stage 2 or 3. This is stage zero, I guess. Let's just look here. Yeah. And then at one, we start seeing these tropical forests flipping from sink to carbon source. So instead of absorbing carbon, they emit. Uh, Global wildfires become extremely frequent and intense. Greenland melt accelerates 20 to 30% faster than the main accepted model. And this churning of hot water from the Gulf to Greenland will start to slow down further. It's already slowing, as far as I understand it. One third of global species at high extinction risk. Crop yields decline 12 to 18%. Corals reefs collapse greater than 90%. Persian Gulf becomes uninhabitable. South Asia sees, let's see here, where were we? South Asia sees 100 million people displaced internally. U.S. Gulf and Southwest transform into heat stress economic zones. Then we're at 2034 to 2038, approaching 2.5°C. Up to 40 to 50% of global terrestrial vertebrates at risk permafrost emissions are rising to about 3 to 5% of man-made emissions. Um, Soil respiration overtakes boreal gains. So that means that the fir forests and even some leafy forests, perhaps, which were locking down carbon, because that's what trees do. They're made out of effectively carbon. They pull it out of the atmosphere. Um, the soil will be giving off CO2 to the extent that the amount stored by forests will not give us a net absorption of CO2. And the ocean uptake, as it warms, drops from 26% to 20%, sort of like the reverse of a solar panel efficiency. And the Southern Ocean starts to uh, begin a heat release at that point. Mountain biodiversity systems collapse. Many megafaunal systems, so this would presumably mean, um, you know, yaks. I'm not sure the ones towards the poles would be a good example, but rhinos, um, chimpanzees. Uh, uh, well, megafauna would be elephants and rhinos and large animals, hippopotamus. Food prices at this point are 200 to 400% above what they are today. There's chronic droughts in the Mediterranean, the U.S. Southwest, and China, and the beginning of a collapse of global insurance. And then when we get to the third stage, the most dangerous threshold, uh, uh, this is 50 to 60% of species are in decline or collapse. So from one third to more than one half. Amazon is basically gone. African tropical forests are entering the phase of burning off and releasing their carbon. As if that was like with the Amazon, we saw that in earlier stage. It started with the Amazon flipping to savanna after this transition from Amazon to sink to carbon emission source. This will cause regular heat waves, killing millions if you're not indoors with AC. 20% of global land area will be uninhabitable. Migration towards the poles accelerates, and 1 to 1.5 billion people become food insecure. Then in stage 4, where we're heading towards 4 degrees, we're talking 70, 80%. 2044 to 2055, fisheries collapse from deoxygenation, ocean dead zones double, Southeast Asia, India, and Pakistan become uninhabitable. And also the Central Africa, Eastern South America. Um, so you can go through. So this is showing us, where do we want to get off on the extinction escalator? And the good news is I have a volume 2, which deals with all the solutions. So we can stabilize our atmosphere and our planet. But we have to do it now. If we do it in 5 years, it's going to be 10 times more damaging and costly. If we'd done it 5 years ago, it would be, one third or one tenth as damaging as costly. So every 5 years, it kind of goes up in order of magnitude in damage that we delay biting the bullet and shutting down the consumerist economy until we got the earth back in balance. So I have a map here, and this map shows the Earth at a 5C, which could happen around 2060 in business as usual. And you see that most of South America is uninhabitable. The Central America, Mexico, and some of this is from sea level rise, but most of it is from um, the area just turning into an arid wasteland that burns all the time and is unproductive. Also from mega flooding in certain areas. So the red area is considered uninhabitable. I want to regenerate this map. I think it's not perfectly accurate. Australia certainly has areas that are not going to do very well in a 5C world. Um, and then, as I mentioned, Siberia and Canada are going to become hissing methane bogs that are from saline intrusion because it's very low altitude. But again, this photo or this graphic, I should say, it will be very useful to do this in a 3C world where I don't think you'll see it as bad, but for animals, the 3C world looks like this because they don't have air conditioning. Um, for humans, this is what it looks like for the 5C world. This is, of course, an approximation, it's unscientific, but everything in this document has been run through some human peer review as well as running it through both Grok and ChatGPT, and been found to be within 85% accuracy by Grok, which is a climate denying structure. But it also appears to analyze these scientific article links. Uh, and then there is ChatGPT, which was instrumental in being able to synthesize all of this. I believe it's the most comprehensive document of its kind that I have certainly seen because it's simply compiling all the latest reports. And we want to get off the extinction escalator. Obviously, we'd like to get off before even this, but in these two bands, not in these two bands. And to do that, we have to have a radical change that you could essentially call a revolution. Um, there's also governance issues here. So we have this big problem with climate disinformation, which creates climate illiteracy. It's a form of scientific failure to understand science because you're ideologically compelled to question it to the point where you yourself would have to become a climate scientist in order to accept this. Because without the math that you personally do, if you're ideologically diametrically opposed to the idea that CO2 and methane industrial activity cause nature's collapse. You won't believe anything unless you were yourself an expert. And that's where this little tiny group of 1% of climate scientists or less are in this fringe group that just doesn't accept the science. But I think it's like 1 in 1,000 at this point. So, here we see food spikes, flood losses at 1.5, crop failure, insurance collapse at 2, inland migration at 2.5, mass migration and war. That's, of course, a little bit speculative at 3. And at 5, resource wars. That's absolutely true. If you go back and look at that map, wherever it is here, This is a overly optimistic picture of the U.S. Um, but regardless, you can imagine the resource wars where all of the 1.4 billion people and the 1 billion people here have to basically move. That's 2.4 billion people on the move, and here you might have 800 million on the move. So this should be an issue in every election if people are concerned about immigration, because what we see now is going to seem like a picnic compared to half the population of the earth no longer able to survive where they live. And the most horrendous thing is if we erect walls and machine gun them as they're trying to crawl into our systems, which is sort of the pathological side of zombie movies, is that fundamentally the zombies are in various, apocalyptic scenarios, us, and the guys machine gunning them might be a small elite. So the movies are all shot from the elite's point of view. Just a thought. It's certainly not perfect. So that's what we want to avoid. And, as things fall apart, the center of Africa is going to become uninhabitable. The area of this is an irony about the Israel-Palestine problem, is these guys are the Zionist Israeli right-wing fanatics are trying to exterminate the Palestinians, but the whole area is going to be uninhabitable. But these guys are so ideological, they'll desalinate, use nuclear, be indoors all the time, grow their food in giant farms. They'll just hang on even when the place is functionally uninhabitable and there's no wildlife other than rats and pigeons and maybe crows, um, if that. So part two is next. So I have a narrative. The If you fly from the north, part two will be the solution. But if you fly from north to south, the equatorial belt glows red rust from desiccated soils. Coastal outlines have blurred under a sea that rose and stayed. The deltas, the Mekong, Ganges, Nile, Mississippi. This is at the 5C World of 2665, are ghost estuaries now where mangrove and coral have given way to sulfurous flats. Inland heat shimmer bends the horizon. Humidity has become a wall that living lungs cannot cross. The wet bulb line, once an academic threshold, now defines the outer edge of civilization. Further poleward, one finds the mixed zones. Once verdant temperate belts turned erratic. Agriculture flickers in artificial valleys. Rivers are dammed not for power, but for temperature control. Forests burn every decade, then regrow as scrub. Their biodiversity, memory erased. Cities that survived have become sealed biomes, self-contained, cooled and lit by filtered sun. The high latitudes, and I had a vision of that. Not that it matters, but when I was meditating, I saw these. Just your mind wandering. I'm not saying it's anything spiritual, but I did contemplate these. On the negative side, these compound cities that would produce their own biosystems. Uh, and on the positive side, thinking about how could we save the Amazon, we could create a giant lattice work over it with temperature control and light filtration to try to preserve these creatures as we go through the contraction. So, the good news is we don't have to go to 3 degrees. We don't have to go to 5 degrees Celsius. Um, but the exponential disaster is such that it's so much better if we get on this now than in 5 years. Uh, it's the difference between your great grandchildren seeing a recovery of nature after decimation that your grandchildren will have to live through, and potentially the so let's say the difference between intervening now and intervening in 2030 meaningfully. Um, the 2030 action means We will have no chimpanzees, no hippos, no rhinos. Most species of tropical birds will be gone. The list is so long. Probably no whales, probably no dolphins. Uh, I haven't gotten down to individual species, but maybe we should look at that just for a second before I sign off, if you're still up to it. We're looking for species. So let's call it, let me see if I can find this. Amphibians. Am I doing this right? Okay, so if we act now, the Amazon basin, amphibians and reptiles, we might be able to keep the losses down to 35%. If we wait 5 years, the losses are going to be 55 to 75%. If we don't even act then, the losses could be 90%. Um, I don't know what it takes to explain this. If we act now, maybe we can hold the Southeast Asian losing 20% of its 25% of its insects instead of 45%, keeping it down to 2.3 versus 2.7 if we act in 2030. But there's no assurance that delaying won't create new nightmares that are accelerating the process. So where do you want to get off the extinction escalator? Because it's 5 times more costly in 5 years from now, but and then 5 years from then, it will just create a environmental nightmare that no one will want to live through. I mean, if we look back at that picture, and we developed this picture greater, it's not going to be all hunky dory in North America and Europe. Large amounts of the American Midwest are going to be decimated as well. The Great Lakes region is the only region, and the far west coast, the very coastline, not even the inland valleys of Oregon and the very far north of California. So, uh, uh, this is what we do not want to see happen. And all these red and orange areas, that environments are going to be so different that they won't have any of the creatures that have lived there the last few million years. Uh, the creature that lives in the Congo today will not live there in the 5C world. There will be other creatures eventually that will move in or survive, but effectively, you're pushing the climate towards the poles. The climate is moving every 10 years about 70 miles towards the pole. Or maybe even faster than that. I have to check. But that means I think it's faster than that. And it's accelerating, of course. But fundamentally, in a 3C world, the deserts of Mexico will be reaching into the northern parts of Kansas climatically, and the 5C world, I can imagine. Um, so that's part one, explaining the latest climate science. Part two is if we act, and there, as I said, there's two main trajectories, which is full mobilization within the current system, which means really things will start around 2030 in terms of extreme activation, because it takes time to ramp up, and it will be preserving the ruling classes, but they will be um, driven by demand as these things start happening to implement these things. And also, presumably, at some point, these reports will reach people like Donald Trump and Lula da Silva and Xi Jinping. And uh, is there any reasonable leader in Europe now? The fellow in Spain, I suppose. Um, yeah, I don't have too many other leaders in Europe I'm a fan of right this moment. But on environmental levels, the problem with Europe is they're so ginned up or amped up about fighting Russia that they've forgotten the climate crisis. I mean, there is an aspect of Russian oil and gas will supposedly speed the green revolution in Europe, but they're planning to build fossil massive armies to fight Russia. And we need a climate of peace. The simple way to fund it is we simply take half of all the military budgets in the world and repurpose them for climate restoration. That is a little bit of an oversimplification, but the forecast for the amount of money we need to implement climate-friendly policies is about the equivalent of half the world's military budgets. And that's all going to come up in part two. There are ways to make things a lot better and ultimately to head towards the climate that we had in the 1850s, which is a paradise for all the things that we like. I mean, we may be able to create a new paradise 10 million years from now with this type of, but it's going to be full of snakes and reptiles, and it's not going to be full of elephants or raccoons or any of the things that we're used to. Okay, thank you, and good night and good luck. I'm Alexander Hagan.